Good afternoon, everyone. My name is André Plaude, and I'm Dean of the Faculty of Public Affairs. In that role, I'm delighted to welcome you to the third annual Catherine A.H. Graham Lecture on Aboriginal Policy here at Carleton University. Carleton University acknowledges and respects the Algonquin people, traditional custodians of the land on which the university campus is situated. I'm honored to introduce to you Elder Jim Albert, who will open our event today. Elder Albert is Bear Clan. He is no stranger to Carleton. He was a long-standing member of the School of Social Work here at Carleton, was at some point in time director of the School of Social Work, and has taught and been part of educational experiences in conventional university settings and involving First Nations practices as well. So I would like Elder Albert to come up and
I'll say bonjour to everybody. I've seen some of you before today, so I thought I should change my wardrobe a bit. This is the third time today we've did an opening prayer, so for your sake, I thought I should at least spiff it up a wee bit. So I'll ask everybody to stand, and I'll do a opening prayer. First, I'll say miigwech for this tobacco that I was given before I do the prayer today, which is what we always do. We always offer the tobacco before when we ask somebody to do something in ceremony. So I'll say bonjour sheminado. I'll send greetings to the Creator. I'll say miigwech, Creator, for again bringing us all together tonight to spend this time with each other. And I say miigwech for all the gifts that are given to us from the sky world, the beautiful grandfather and the grandmother moon that travels the sky every day as well. So and all those other gifts from the sky world, they're all there for us to observe and see and have that awe about. And also all the gifts of Mother Earth, all the other creatures that share this earth with us and we share with them, and all the plants and trees and all the other creatures that are there to help us on along in our journey. And I say miigwech for them all, Creator, and I ask you to help me never to take them for granted, to help me to acknowledge them and say miigwech, offer that thank you to them every day. So I say miigwech for all of those things that I've have in my life to help me on my journey, and all the other people that walk with me, people that I know that are close, my family and friends, and then all the other layers of people that are around us all the time that are there to teach us, to accompany us, to share their love and their wisdom and their ways with us. So I say miigwech for all that, Creator. I'm blessed by so many things. I just ask you, Creator, too, because I always have to ask the Creator for things, because we always need things as well. And I ask the Creator just to help us all be in a good way with each other tonight, to have those good ears to hear the words that are going to be spoken, for our benefit, for us to hear, and help us have those good ears to hear the words in a good way. Yahu, miigwech.
Thank you, Elder Jim Albert. We're privileged and honored that you are here to open our event today. Once again, welcome everyone. This lectureship is named for Catherine Graham, Professor of Public Policy and Administration at Carleton. Beginning in 1998, Professor Graham served as Associate Dean of Research in the Faculty of Public Affairs and was appointed Dean of the Faculty in 2003. She served as Dean for 6 years, after which she was appointed Interim Associate Vice President Academic, and she's now serving as Senior Advisor to the President and Provost. Catherine's own research focuses on local governance, community development, Aboriginal policy, and policy processes. As Associate Dean of Research in the Faculty of Public Affairs, she encouraged action-oriented research and policy innovation by researchers, students, and centers in all fields, from weapons in space to refugees in downtown Ottawa, with partners in all sectors, governments, nonprofits, and business. Her leadership as Dean solidified the collective identity of this unique and vibrant faculty, a faculty that leads every day in areas that are important in every aspect of Canadian society. During her tenure as Dean, she hired a cohort of new faculty whose drive for excellence and creativity is producing a steady flow of new projects, conferences, courses, and publications across all fields in public affairs. She led successful fundraising initiatives involving the McConnell Foundation, Bell Canada, the Royal Bank, as well as broad-based support for Kruger College, scholarships and academic chairs, and from private and public donors. Catherine is also known for her excellent work in championing community service learning. With Sonia Bata, she pioneered the Carleton Batawa Initiative, a collaboration between Carleton University and the Batawa Development Corporation to make the community of Batawa a model for sustainable community development. She chairs Community-Based Research Canada, a national network of universities and community-based organizations fostering community university research engagement. In addition to all of this, Catherine has demonstrated a long-standing commitment to engaged research on Aboriginal policy. She served as an advisor to the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples and to numerous Aboriginal government and policy organizations. She has conducted research on issues facing Aboriginal citizens in urban centres, governance models for northern communities, and the challenge and opportunities associated with Aboriginal education. She has been a champion of the public administration program delivered in Nunavut by the School of Public Policy and Administration. This lectureship was established in recognition of Catherine's contributions to Carleton University and to the field of Aboriginal policy. Being who she is, Catherine will want the focus of the event in her honor to be on the substantive issues of the lecture, and the spotlight to be on our remarkable speaker, Satsan. But Professor Graham herself deserves to be honored for her record of achievement and her contributions to Carleton, to Ottawa, to Canada, and indeed to the world. Please join me in acknowledging. We're extremely privileged to have Satsan, President of the National Centre for First Nations Governance, deliver our lecture this afternoon. At this time, I invite Carleton University Provost and Vice President Academic, Peter Ricketts, to introduce him to you. Peter?
Thank you, Andre, and welcome, everyone. It's really wonderful to see so many people here this evening at the Catherine Graham Lecture to listen to our speaker, Satsan, Herb George, and we're very, very grateful to you for coming right across the country, I suspect, but to be here, and we are very, very grateful for that. Before I introduce Satsan, if I could just, though, add my gratitude and appreciation for the work that Catherine Graham has done for the university, but continues to do, to promote Aboriginal education, to promote research, community partnerships with Aboriginal communities and organizations in the region. And we really are appreciative of all that work, and it is helping to move us along, I think, and make Carleton a much more welcoming place for Aboriginal students, a much more open place for engaging in the kinds of research and the kinds of partnerships which can truly work, where Aboriginal communities in the university can truly work hand in hand as true partners and true allies in what is our goal, which is education and making our students a better world and helping them make it a better world too. But also to give back a little bit for the wonderful territory on which we are able to have this campus and to operate. It truly is an honor and a privilege to be in such a beautiful place, and we're very grateful for that. But tonight my job is to introduce Satsan, so I will do that with great pleasure. Satsan is a Wet'suwet'en Hereditary Chief of the Frog Clan, and he has been a long-time speaker for the Wet'suwet'en Nation and previously served as speaker for both the Gitxsan and Wet'suwet'en nations. He was also an adjunct associate professor in the School of Public Administration at the University of Victoria and taught for several years in the university's Administration of Aboriginal Governments program. Satsan has considerable experience with Aboriginal rights and title, as well as Aboriginal self-government and education. He was a key figure and strategist in the Delgamuukw Gisdewe case, which was the subject of a landmark judgment by the Supreme Court of Canada in December of 1997, which was a turning point in the issues of Aboriginal land claims, but also the rights of Aboriginal title, and also including the recognition of the value and importance of using oral history to be entered into court evidence. He offered advice and assistance to First Nations across British Columbia and Canada on the affirmation and recognition of Aboriginal rights, title, and treaty rights. He most recently served 2 3-year terms as the elected BC Regional Chief for the Assembly of First Nations and was a member of the AFN National Executive, where he had responsibility for the Delgamuukw, and he headed up the Delgamuukw Gisdewe National Process, which was an extensive community-based process of research, public education, and organization. He also held the executive portfolio for fiscal relations. Satsan is currently president of the National Center for First Nations Governance, a First Nations-controlled initiative designed to help First Nations achieve their inherent right to self-government. He is trained in law and education, and he attended Simon Fraser University and the University of British Columbia. Sorry you didn't attend Carleton, but maybe we can change that going forward in the future. We're very glad that you're attending Carleton now this evening. He is also a father, and he has 3 children, and he gives a passion and commitment to his message. And I know that you're going to be enthralled tonight with his presentation, which is entitled A New Era in Aboriginal Crown Relations, a New Frontier for Educational Institutions. Please give a warm Carleton welcome and miigwech to Satsan.
Someone stole my pen. Thanks very much for that wonderful introduction. It's a great honor to be here. I very much appreciate the invitation. But first of all, I want to acknowledge the fact that we are on Algonquin land. And I want to also acknowledge Chief Gilbert White Duck. I very much appreciated your words earlier, Chief, and I hope that people were listening to what you had to say. I want to thank Carleton for this honor to be invited here to take part in this distinguished lecture series. It's good to meet you, Catherine. What a great honor to have something like this in honor of your accomplishments and your passion and drive. That's good to see. I wanted to also take this opportunity to give you a short, quick history of Canada and the fact that it's changed as far as you know it. And that is the challenge that we have before us, both as First Nations people and Canadians in general, from coast to coast to coast. I was speaking with one of the leaders in British Columbia just recently. His name is Guja, who's the president of the Council of the Haida Nation. And we were talking about the incredible challenge that we have in front of us. If you look at it in its entirety, just internally, to reconcile amongst ourselves as people and our communities, to try to heal from the damage done, to try to rebuild our communities, our societies, to address the issue of poverty, all of the ills that come along with it, the needs concerning education, a relationship, a new relationship with the Crown, a new relationship with the public, business and industry, and in fact to create a new Canada. A new Canada where First Nations are in a place where they should have been at the outset. So we're talking about this, and he said, oh man, I don't know if I want to keep on doing this because, man, oh, that's a huge problem. And he was actually talking about leaving. And I kind of got angry with him. And I said, don't talk to me like that. Damn it, we worked long and hard to create this opportunity that we have. And there's so much more to do. And we need everybody who has something to offer to bring us to this place that we need and want to be. I said, stop looking at it as a bad problem and a big problem. It's a good problem to have. And we created it for ourselves. And ultimately, it's up to us to find a way to conclude the kind of resolution that it needs. So I wanted to talk to you about that and try to impress upon you and drive it into your memory that not whether or not you like it or not, the fact of the matter is we have a new era as far as Crown and Aboriginal relationships are concerned in this country, and things will never be the same again. And that's not to say that change is necessarily going to be bad and it's going to hurt someone and take something away, but that change is necessary. And that this new relationship has to be guided with dialogue such as we've seen today, because difficult questions are going to emerge sometimes on their own and sometimes because circumstances force them forward. But the fact of the matter is we have a lot of learning to do between one another and amongst each others to give effect to this new reality. And it's interesting because my own journey in my own life has come kind of full circle. My first experience with higher education was at a community college in Terrace through Northwest Community College. And somehow I had watched this movie called Burn. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it. A Marlon Brando movie that was pulled out of the theaters because people wouldn't leave after they watched it. And what Burn was about colonization and how colonization is done and how you keep it. And it was this fictional country where there was an uprising amongst the black people who were colonized, with a leader who was stepping up to bring this forward. And Marlon Brando plays the part of this man from the colonizing country to come and quash this rebellion. So he arrives by ship to this country. And as he's walking off the ship, he's packing a bag. And this black person comes to him and says, "Can I take your bag?" You know, of course, he's used to that, so he hands off the bag. And the rest of the story is about how he engages with the people, gets their trust, and then he crushes them. And the movie is called Burn because he burnt them out. And at the end of the movie, as he's getting back on the ship, he's packing his bags, he's been successful at his job, and he hears this voice say, "Can I take your bag, sir?" And I'm in this class, and this professor is talking about the history of First Nations people in Canada. And he made some comment, and I responded by saying, "Pack my bags." And he said, what did you say? And I said, "Pack my bags, honky." Because I was an angry person. I grew up angry because of what had happened. And he became my friend, and he calmed me down. And he said, "You're not going to get anywhere to change in this situation through anger. But if you really want to do something about this, you've got to learn to go at it in a different way." So I learned to temper my anger. And I realized in the last little while that because of the changes that we've accomplished, that I got to come back to this institution again and say, "Listen, we need your help. We need your help to give positive and constructive change that we need to see. And this is what we need. And this is why you as an institution need to realize that you need it too." So it's not just a one-way street. It's many, many streets interconnecting. But I want to talk about this new era, and it comes from a new memory. I was involved in the Delgamuukw and Gitxsan court action since 1975, when I got home to be the first band manager in my community. And I was lucky and kind of confounded at the time to be met by our chiefs, hereditary chiefs, who welcomed me home, not to be the band manager, but they welcomed me home to the territory to work with them to address the outstanding land question. And in our neck of the woods, which is north central British Columbia, the McKenna-McBride Commission came through our lands in 1913. So it's not as long as it has here and in Atlantic Canada. And one of the people that the McKenna-McBride Commission encountered was my grandfather, whose name was Denise Goufflat. He was one of the hereditary chiefs in the clan I come from today. And they want to talk to him about setting up reserves. And he said, "I'm not prepared to talk to you about that. What are you talking about? You're going to come here and give me land. You want me to move from here to there? What I'll talk to you about is how we will share with you, but you have no land to give me." And we all know what happened. In the intervening years, our people were pushed off the land. The Indian Act was imposed upon us, and the dependence that goes along with it, and all of the problems that we've experienced and know resulted from it. And I grew up in that, in the midst of, in my opinion, the height of the social chaos in our community. The violence, the alcoholism that was already entrenched, the abuse that in every which way was flying forward and at full speed. And I'm a little kid growing up in this. I'm watching it and I'm seeing it, and I can't understand it. It's like a big supernatural monster that wants to claw me up and kill me. And I made it my business at a very young age, I'm not going to let that happen. And I fought against it and questioned it and challenged it all the way along. I stopped going to church because I couldn't reconcile between what they were trying to teach me and the way they treated my parents, the way they treated us. And my dad, who was a fierce Catholic, tried to deal with me on that, and I wouldn't relent. And my first day in high school, at residential school, the principal of the school, a priest, an oblate, Mary Immaculate, comes in and he punches me clear over my desk because I refused to go to church that Sunday when we got there. And so they wouldn't let me eat that night. And the next day I had to go to school, and I had a date with the principal. But I'm in my classroom before it starts, and I'm talking to the other students and saying, we can't let them do this to us. We can't let them force this on us. And here the principal is standing there listening to me talk. And he came in and he just punched me in the side of the head over the desk. And I was just a skinny kid. But I was angry too. And when you're angry, you think you're tougher than you are. And I got up to go at him, and there was a couple of girls from my village who were at school as well, and they stopped me. So I grew up with that, all the time knowing that I have a responsibility to do something about this, that we can't let this be the case for the upcoming generations and other children. And there's got to be some explanation for this. It has to change. And so that's what our hereditary chiefs were doing, our elders and our people. We started the challenge to address this matter. And we did all kinds of different things. There was a time when I first got home where 13 of our elders and chiefs were arrested on the rivers for fishing. And according to the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, fishing illegally. And so it was an undercover operation, and they arrested all these people. And so my first task was to be appointed to the Defense Committee. So there were 4 of us that were appointed. And we won all those cases in 1 year and a day. Only one case went to appeal, and we won that as well. But we won them all by technicalities. It didn't really change anything. Most of all, they couldn't identify us, because we'd pack the courtroom with whoever's being charged with all their relatives. And the one thing that we banked on is that we all looked the same to them. So of course they never could identify people, so we'd win. And then the big Camano completion project was on to dam rivers in our area to do more flooding. And we got organized to stop that as well. Clear-cut logging, we got organized to stop that. We're out on blockades all the time. In the winter time, summertime, all the time. Going in to engage the public politically at every level. I remember going into a meeting in Smithers. There was about self-government, where we had 3 sitting MPs from the Conservative Alliance at the time, a couple of MLAs and their cadre of experts talking about the fact that we don't like and we shouldn't have self-government. So I attended this meeting, and there was only one other First Nations person there, and the place was packed. So they all had 15 minutes, and the facilitator says, does anybody have a question? So I put up my hand and I said, well, I don't have a question, but I'd like 15 minutes up there to rebut because the First Nations side is not here. So the guy asked the people, what do you think? Should we hear from Herb? Oh yeah, bring him on. So they brought me on. So I got up there, did my presentation to them. And at the end of my presentation, there was just this unbelievable response. People were jumping up and down, hollering, I'm a welfare bum, I'm a drunk, I'm a lazy, no good for Indian, everything you can imagine. And I was shocked. But I started to cheer them on. I said, come on, I can't hear you, louder. And they got louder and louder and louder. And then they caught themselves. And they calmed down and they sat down. And I said, good on you. good on you for you to get that off your chest. Because at the end of the day, you still got to talk to me. You know, and people thought I was crazy to be able to do that. But it's what it took. And it went from that situation to a year later, when people in that community were saying, Satsan, if you want a place to build your house, you can come and build it right next to mine. You know, so we started to change a public perception around the area. And we went into the Supreme Court of British Columbia in 1986, and we did it in Smithers. We convinced the Supreme Court to come to our territory. And we lost at the Supreme Court of British Columbia because the Supreme Court didn't believe our evidence. Because what we did was we led with our own evidence from our oral histories. And of course, we know that under the rules of evidence, that's referred to as hearsay. So we had to do this trial within a trial called a voir dire to try to create a situation where the court would accept it and give weight and respect to it. And the argument that we used was the Bible. You know, when our chiefs and elders and people were getting up there to give evidence, we had to swear on the Bible. So we pointed out to the court that the Bible in its entirety is a result of oral history. And what resulted was we were able to continue to give our evidence. But what happened with the decision is that the Chief Justice at the time didn't take it into account. Didn't believe it. In fact, he suggested that we made it up. And he said that at best, our lives were nasty, brutish, and short. And he's quoting Hobbes from Leviathan, and then he misspells Hobbes. He and I opened an International Bar Association conference in Vancouver afterwards. We were both keynote speakers at the open and plenary session. And I told the organizers that I wasn't going to be able to get there right off the bat because I was flying in there that morning. And so the whole conference was held up because Chief Justice McEachran, as he then was, wouldn't go on by himself because he thought that I was going to make a mockery of him because of the decision. And he wouldn't go until I came and talked to him. So I went to see him in the adjacent hotel, and I understood him. I understood his reluctance, and I respected it. And I went up to him and I said, I know why you're worried, and I know what you're afraid of, but I want to assure you that that will not happen. I will conduct myself as a hereditary chief, and we don't conduct ourselves like that. And so he came, and we were piped in together. So, but anyway, through that process, we had to rally. And I had to bring this decision home to our people, and our people were shocked by it, because we believed if we gave the truth, that truth would prevail. And so people were shocked. And then our chiefs got up and they said, well, we have to go forward. And no one can stop us now. No one can touch us because we're invisible people. If we don't have a language, if we don't have a history, if we don't have a homeland, if we don't have a spirituality, then we must be invisible. And let's keep on going forward. So we did. Into the Court of Appeal. And we overturned a major decision of the Supreme Court of British Columbia, which was that our rights were extinguished prior to Confederation through the colonies, the setting up of the colonies in British Columbia. So that was a big deal for us. Then into the Supreme Court of Canada, and ultimately winning the first legal recognition of Aboriginal title and rights in this country. Recognition of Aboriginal title and rights, the constitutional protection, and the admissibility of oral evidence, of oral history as evidence. So I always argue that we didn't change the rules of evidence, we created a new rule of evidence. And subsequently to that, we started to negotiate, and there have been a lot of other cases since then, but the negotiations have not changed much since. And things have changed around it. For example, in British Columbia, the BC Treaty process, the mandate of Canada and the province of British Columbia hasn't changed since the process was brought forward in 1991. And the mandate is, we will negotiate with you over 5% of your territory. And it could be in the form of land, cash, or economic opportunities, or a combination. And we will negotiate with you a limited form of municipal governance. Well, the fact of the matter is that the law has far, far surpassed the mandate that's expressed there. And so the work that we've been trying to do, that I've been trying to do as a National Centre on First Nations Governance, is to work with our people in our community, first of all, to promote an understanding and realization that we've accomplished what we've been looking for, that we've effectively regained jurisdiction to our territories, that we have a legal interest in the land, that we have the inherent right to govern ourselves, and that the relationship that's contemplated between First Nations people and the Crown is the government-to-government relationship. A third order of government, if you will. So we're doing all this stuff, and in preparation for going into the Supreme Court of Canada, our chiefs met because it took so long, so we get together to talk about why we're doing this. So I was there, and one of our chiefs said it's about creating a new memory in the minds of our children. And it just, word went in your ear, out the other one. But when I got home, I was thinking about it. That night I'm thinking about it. I went to sleep thinking about what did he mean. So I went to see him the next day, the next community to my own. I said, yesterday you said this was about putting a new memory in the minds of our children. What did you mean by that? Then he said, this is usually the storytelling time for our people. This is when we sat our children down and told them stories about who we are as a people, our history on this land, about the land itself and about how we conduct our use of it, about the animals, about the birds and about the fish and the relationship that we have, and how properly to recognize and respect one another as people. He said, those were the stories that we used to tell. Now the stories we tell are about our anger and about our pain and our suffering. And if we continue to tell those kind of stories, then our children are going to continue to be born and grow up in this realm of helplessness and hopelessness. And if we want to change that, we've got to change the stories that we tell. That's what this is about. When we win, we're going to start to tell new stories. It was really interesting. I was going through an airport, and I found this little book by Ben Okri. And he did a study of oral histories in South Africa prior to the dismantling of apartheid. And what he said in his little book was that you can tell the health of a people and the state of a nation by the stories that they tell. And that really connected up with what our chief said. So what I've been trying to do is to tell different stories, to about being successful, about achieving your goals, to replace helplessness and hopelessness with powerful hope and a new vision for the future. But people sometimes don't believe it. So I want to paraphrase words by Justice Ian Binney from the Supreme Court of Canada, who, when we were doing a conference at the University of Alberta on reconciliation, was our keynote speaker. And while he was in practice, he was often on the other side of the fence from us as far as the battle goes. And he was a formidable opponent. So our nickname for him was the Prince of Darkness. And here he is, a Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada. Anyway, he got up, gave his keynote speech, and he put it in the context of an article written by Gordon Gitxsan in the Globe and Mail, where Gordon Gitxsan said three things. He said, one, the Supreme Court of Canada has given Indians too much. Two, where does the Supreme Court of Canada get off on being social activists? And three, where is the legitimacy? Justice Binney got up and he said, people like Gordon Campbell and the rest of the Canadian public have got to understand that we are in a new era as far as Crown and Aboriginal relations are concerned. We aren't giving Indians anything more than they already had, which is pre-existent sovereignty, which is not the subject of a grant from anybody. They already have it. They continue to have it. And as far as being social activists is concerned, we've forced First Nations into our court because we've denied them. And whether you like it or not, they've came into our court, in effect a foreign court, and beat us at our own game. So get used to it. And then he said, as far as legitimacy is concerned, what's more legitimate than the highest law of the land, which is the Constitution Act of 1982, and the inclusion of Section 35, which recognizes and protects existing Aboriginal and treaty rights. He went on further to say that the procedural right to proper consultation, the substantive right to accommodation when treaty or Aboriginal rights are infringed is there, designed to drive negotiations towards proper reconciliation. And the reconciliation that's contemplated, as I mentioned earlier, is as a government-to-government relationship. So if you look at the case law, starting from Delgamuukw and Gitxsan and the recognition of Aboriginal and treaty rights, including the inescapable economic component, the right to use the land at your own discretion, the right to self-government. And you look at Haida, where it says that the Crown has an obligation to properly consult and accommodate, where the province is asking the court, okay, if we have to talk to them, when do we need to talk to them? The court's response was that you need to talk to them at the strategic level of government. So in that instance, they're talking about forest lands. So if you're the government of British Columbia, the strategic level of government with respect to forest lands is number one, land use planning. What are we going to do with it? Then you make decisions with respect to it. Leases, license, permits, tree farm licenses, 1, 2, 3, 5, 10-year, 15-year, 10 years, and so on. And then you put in place a management regime to deal with it. And in British Columbia, it's the Forest Act in that instance. Then you start to let the opportunities. And then you start to enter into the realm of co-management between the companies and the Ministry of Forests and the Crown. So what does that mean? That means that when they come to deal with us, that we have got to be organized to meet them and to deal with them at the same level, that strategic level of government with respect to any matter. Under Section 91, the federal powers, the Section 92, the provincial powers, any infringement on either side has got to go through this process. And then you look further to the Cree people out of Alberta in a Mikisew case, where you have a federal situation, federal policy, environmental review policy, the building of a winter road for mine and exploration, and the Cree people, the Mikisew people, challenged. And the argument for Canada was that, well, we don't have to talk to them. The fact that they have a treaty means that there's no more rights. They've been extinguished because of treaty. Their second argument was that if there were any residual rights, as far as the Treaty 8 was concerned, the fact that they put Wood Buffalo National Park on top of it extinguished it. And thirdly, they argued that, they said, well, and on top of that, we followed our policy to the T. Well, the Supreme Court of Canada came back and said, you're wrong on all counts. With respect to policy, the Supreme Court said that the Crown, when it's justifying its infringement of Aboriginal and treaty rights, can't rely on its own legislation. And that means that First Nations have the right to their legislation too. And they have their right to policy that reflects that. And the reconciliation that's being contemplated, that's what Justice Binney said, was that between that two jurisdictions, those two sovereignties, laws, policies, negotiations, reconciliation. That's what's contemplated there. And so that's the new era that we've got to deal with now. And just this morning I was meeting with the Canadian Council of Chief Executives on energy. And they've having the same dialogue discussion that you're having, is how do we deal with First Nations people? We know that if we want to move forward in our business realm, that we need to talk to them. But we just don't know how, and we don't know who to talk to. And we want something that's quick, and we want something that lasts. And I'm saying, well, you know, where do you get the we from? You got a rat in your pocket? You know, there are other we's in the picture, and that's the new era. So this discussion is happening all across the country. And when we talk about, from the policy perspective, one of the biggest challenges that we have to give effect to this for First Nations is to do the land use planning that's necessary, to put in place the laws that reflect the jurisdiction that we have and that we want, and to put in place effective and efficient public policy to give expression to it. But we've been under the Indian Act for so long. Someone talked about 7 generations today. Well, it might be shocking to you to know that the babies being born today are the 8th generation under the Indian Act. So we need help when it comes to putting in place the proper laws. We need help when it comes down to talking about effective and efficient public policy to reflect that, because we don't have the experience right now to do it. So if you look at the picture in its entirety, you'll see that what is needed goes right from the realm of, on the one hand, land use planning and decision making, natural resource management, fiscal relations, public administration, health, education, child welfare. It's enormous. And that's what we've got to start to see from the universities and the higher education institutions across this country. So the challenge, I guess, for the universities in this new frontier is that exactly what it is. Because what we have in place for the most part is far removed from the new era that we have. And we've got to reconcile between what's there and the reality that's here today. And we know that universities are amongst the oldest institutions in the world, the slowest to change. And it has been slow. So the change that we're talking about today was started 15 or 20 years ago. And it's now just beginning to manifest itself in the dialogue between and amongst people. So the way I look at it is that I'm very, very optimistic about the opportunities that we have and the challenge that we've got in front of us, the good problem. Because it means that we've got to find a way to deal with it. And in order to find that way, it means we've got to create opportunities for dialogue amongst the proper people, to find our way through it, to find solutions that work, that are respectful. And it's not just about skills as far as our needs are concerned. It's also about teaching Canadians a new history and a new reality. So that's a big, big challenge, to see if we could change the way history is taught, to change the curriculum, to recognize that we're not just a problem and a drain on the taxpayers' dollars, that we are the first people of this land. And when you talk about Confederation, we are the fathers and mothers of Confederation. And if we can put ourselves in that position, then I think we're talking about the kind of Canada that we all deserve to live in, where we all have our rightful place. And I dream for that day, because I don't want my children doing this. And I'm just getting a little bit fed up with it myself. You know, I'm kind of tired of talking about it. But it's important. So we have this new era, there's no doubt about it. We have this tremendous challenge ahead of us. I am extremely optimistic that we're going to get there, because you see it happening. And I encourage Carleton University to not only to continue this, but in the words of Chief earlier on, not just in short little pitter-patter steps, but by leaps and bounds, because it needs urgent action. So I'm very, very honored to have this opportunity. I thank you for listening, and I think if there's any time for a question, I'll be happy to try to answer.
So Satsan has agreed to take some questions. So there is a microphone in the back. Could I invite you to go there, and please identify yourself. And then short questions, please, would be great. Thank you.
I much enjoyed your talk today. I'm wondering if you think perhaps there should be established in the Canadian Constitution an actual status equivalent perhaps to that of provinces for Aboriginal people in Canada.
I didn't get the last part of it.
To establish something like the status of a province for Aboriginal people as a whole in Canada.
Okay. I got into Ottawa late last night. I was trying to stay up until midnight so it gets close to my own time to go to bed. So I get to bed and I'm just dozing off and I hear this rustling in my room and I'm thinking, what the heck is that? There's something in my room. And I wake up from this kind of sleeping stupor and I'm imagining I'm seeing things. And then I realize there's nothing there and I say, it must be something in my suitcase. Maybe somebody put a rat in there. But what it was we're doing a conference this weekend at the University of Toronto Law School on Section 35 of the Constitution Act at 30 years. It's the 30-year anniversary this year. So they were stuffing papers under my door. And whether or not we need special provisions like that in the Constitution, I think is a question for the future. I think the big challenge now as far as the Constitution goes is not more argument and opinion about what it means, but again, using Justice Binney's words. When Section 35 came into the Constitution Act in 1982, the Crown's response and the way they treated it, their interpretation, was that there are no more Aboriginal or existing treaty rights. So in effect, Section 35 is an empty box. Well, Justice Binney said, the fact of the matter is, Section 35 now is a full box of rights whose content can only be determined by the people who hold it. And that's the challenge that I think we need to turn our attention to before we start looking beyond it. And that means that we've got to engage the rights holders who are the First Nations citizens of all the different nations across the country. And that's an internal challenge. That's something we have to do. So my own sense of it is that we shouldn't be looking beyond job one. I was reviewing a paper out of New Zealand, and they have there in that legislature X amount of seats that are Maori seats. And they've got the Treaty of Waitangi, and they've done a lot of work around that. And so the question they had was whether or not it needed to be put into the Constitution. And the conclusion that I was looking at was that they felt that in order to have the same kind of protection we have in Canada, that they might have to move to that direction, hopefully.
Hi, my name is Brian Owens. I'm a student here at Carleton and currently working with Aboriginal Affairs on a work term. First, I'd like to certainly thank you very much for your presentation. It was very enjoyable. The question that I had for you is related to the fact that the federal government is putting together and has in these past years a lot of legislation or functions that have direct impacts on First Nations people in the country. And one of the consistent concerns and objections has been a lack of consultation. And that's something you touched on in your presentation. And the question that I have is whether well, I suppose one of the examples that this sort of draws on is the proposed bill right now that makes changes directly to the Indian Act, removes some references to residential schools, removes the requirement to have bylaws approved by the minister. And I think those are things that would have garnered a good deal of support, but there was a lack of consultation up front. And my question is whether you would support or advocate for sort of an outright rejection of such approaches on the principle that there was insufficient consultation, or if you would prefer to take the approach of using the positive aspects of those pieces of legislation and pushing for greater consultation in the future.
Wow. If I answer that, people will think I'm running for something. That's a tough question. Because it, notwithstanding what I've just said, it clearly flies in the face of it. Because if there was recognition there, you wouldn't have a situation like that. And that's part of the problem that we have across the country, and it's a problem that the chief executives were speaking to as well. What about the Crown? And if you look at what we've accomplished in the law and the constitutional and legal obligations that are there in terms of legislation and policy, I would say that the province of British Columbia, just in terms of policy, is probably further ahead than anybody else in the country. And it's because a lot of it is happening there. But if you put it up against, on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the law, and the law doesn't reflect everything that I believe my right is, but I think it's enough to get there. So if we measure it in the law as 10, British Columbia's policy is about a 1.5. And what British Columbia, the political strategy, is to get all the First Nations to engage them under their policy. And they'll do that happily as long as all the cows keep coming back to the pasture. There are a few nations in British Columbia, however, that the province treats differently. And there, the scale has gone up to around, 7 to 8 out of 10. And you generally see that where First Nations are more organized, with respect to their capacity and doing and knowing what they want. And as far as that policy is concerned, you're starting to see it move across the country. And different jurisdictions are having different problems and issues with it. I was here a couple of years ago doing a thing at, again, the University of Toronto, where the then Attorney General, Michael Bryant, he got up and he said, "What am I supposed to do? I know the law. I'm a lawyer." He said, "But yet I've got 6 people in jail. We've got a political animal that I got to deal with. What do we do?" And that's similar to what we've got with the federal government. You look back just recently, like 2 years ago or so, the Standing Committee on Aboriginal Affairs of the Senate, and they're talking about economic development, recommended to the government to recognize their legal obligation in terms of consultation and accommodation as a driver for economic development. And it would have been, but of course it didn't happen. And you look at the Gateway Project in British Columbia, huge thing. There's billions of dollars being invested into it. And on the face of it, it looks as if government and certain parts of the business and industry are thinking that they can just push it through. And the arrogance is unbelievable, and the strategy is very, very questionable, and their interpretation of the law, I think, is ultimately what hurts them. Because they ultimately went on the belief that First Nations don't have a veto, so we can just keep going. Well, we know that's not the case. And in fact, you've got a situation in British Columbia where it's not just First Nations, it's all the municipalities and the public who are saying no too. You look at the situation with legislation, there's a roaring silence that confounds me. We have our provincial organizations, we have a national organization. And I was just thinking the other day, this government is running over our national chief, is trampling our national chief, and no one is helping. There's a reason why all these different things have happened over the past while, different processes, because we forced the agenda. And it seems to me, in my own experience, just going back in my own part of the world, since 1991, we've taken the foot off the gas pedal, and government has gotten complacent. You know, they've started to think, oh, well, you know, we've got them taken care of. And that's what we're starting to see. And I think it's a dangerous place for government to go, and there's no reason to be going there. I think that the proper thing to do is to engage the First Nations properly. They did, and then they went on their own. But I think the big challenges for First Nations itself, I mean, ourselves, you know, sometimes we're not only talking out of both sides of our mouth, we're talking out of four sides of our mouth. We can't even understand ourselves sometimes. You know, so there's got to be discipline and focus and commitment amongst our own people and leadership before we get to talking with Harper or anybody else about legislation. And that's proper recognition and respect. That's the kind of reconciliation that we need to see. And I'm not sure if they're going to be successful or not. I think it's like a lot of trial firing, seeing if we'll blink. But, you know, to be honest with you, this last while, I just turned 60 years old. You know, I'm thinking about, I've been doing this all my life. And I wouldn't mind to try a few other things. Like, I think I'd be a great artist, maybe a crossover country blues superstar. You know, like, I think about stuff, you know, I would like to do. But this stuff that's happening is kind of getting in my craw, man. I'm starting to feel like I'm going to put back on my gear. And I'm going to get back out there, and I'm going to, you know, make them realize it's in their best interest to treat us differently. But I don't really want to do that. But that's the way I feel now. And it's unfortunate. You know, we have a government of this country which doesn't even recognize its own constitution and live up to the letter of the law that's there. And is still requiring of First Nations people to prove every little bit of our existence in the Constitution. Nobody else is required to do that. Were you ever required to prove you have title in the land or rights or anything like that, to have the benefit of the Constitution? Anybody here? No. An immigrant from any country in the world can come here today and gain citizenship and say this land is theirs. And no one's going to blink. Not going to bother anybody. Welcome. If you can make us better, welcome. You know, so it's sometimes it's really, really hard to get your mind around. It's a long answer to a short question, but okay.
Thank you very much for your really deeply inspiring speech that I'll remember for a long time. You were talking about 8 generations, and in that context you were saying that you need help. And I'm wondering if you could speak about your view of a model of collaboration, of healthy collaboration in the context of the Carleton community. That makes sense. short questions. So.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it really is amazing. 8 generations. My youngest son just came home on this past Monday from being in the States for a couple of years. He got home and we sat down to talk, and I started to talk, and he said, "No, listen to me. I got something I want to say." I said, "Okay." And he said, "You know, Dad, I'm really concerned about our culture and about our language and our history, because I fear we're losing it. And if we lose it, who am I going to be?" You know? And that's what all of those young generation are talking about. That's what's most important to them. It's about their identity as people. But in terms of help and a good constructive model, I live on Haida Gwaii, which is the homeland of my wife. That's where my wife comes from. And they have a reconciliation agreement with the province of British Columbia, where in effect the Haida have regained their jurisdiction to their whole land. And they just, not too long ago, maybe a month or so ago, just released the annual allowable cut volume for Haida Gwaii. And it was done collaboratively between the province, the Haida and the non-Haida that are there. And they're doing similar things in other areas. And what's really amazing to me, like working right across the country, is I don't see a relationship to that level anywhere else in the country between and amongst the people who are living there. In fact, I was at a funeral one day, one of the elders in the village, and he was a grandfather. And he was the grandfather to this little white boy who was a grandson through a marriage. He was 15 years old. So during this ceremony, the Haida do their own thing. I noticed to my right, just a little wall there, this young kid, and they were putting the regalia on him, dancing apron and tied around his waist, putting a blanket on him, headdress. And I'm looking at this, and I'm seeing a red-headed white kid. And I'm amazed by this, and I'm watching the people to see what kind of reaction. And there was none. No negative reaction, no surprise. And then this other young Haida man goes walking up with a drum in his hands. And he said, "I'm going to drum for this young man who's going to dance in honor of his Chinai, which is grandfather in Haida. And he was from the Eagle clan. And he's going to dance the Eagle dance." And this young kid came out, and he danced the Eagle dance as good as I've ever seen it danced. And I got to say, I was quite taken by that. I thought that's the kind of reconciliation that we need to be working towards, when we can interact as people like that, with that much recognition and respect, where it doesn't bother anybody, that we can see it for what it is and accept it as it is. So there are examples like that. And those are good examples. Those are best practices that we could use in other places. Anybody else? I hope that answered your question. I lost you. Where were you sitting? Okay.
Thank you very much again for your lecture. It was very educational, and also sharing your stories, I think, really helped. I'll admit that my education has been neglected, and I think that's part of the process in moving forward. And this is just sort of drawing upon the question that the last person had. You talked about a best practice example. do you have any, I guess, practical tools that we can use to better engage in a respectful manner? Because I think that that's sort of a concern when you talk about healing and I guess sort of the hopefulness that we have moving forward. That's sort of an issue I think that's in place. And I forgot to introduce myself. I'm an MBA candidate from the Sprott School of Business, and I'm also a junior policy analyst with NRCan. My research is focused on Aboriginal employment in the mining sector, so that's where my interest lies.
I think the most amazing thing I've seen, and we use it, is called open space facilitation, where we bring different people together. And we've done this in different parts of the country where we brought business and industry, First Nations, and government together to talk about this new era and to talk about building this new relationship. And my own experience is that it's the most practical tool that I know of, where you can bring people together in a respectful, constructive way and come out of it with something good. And we use it almost exclusively in our work. My feeling about just general facilitation is that usually you're facilitating to get agreement to a decision that's already been made, whereas open space is about something that comes from people thinking about the issue or the context or the problem and bringing forth their own thought on it. And I think that when you do something like that, people feel empowered, they feel respected, and they believe they're heard because they see it. And that was what I was bringing forward to the chief executives this morning, was to say, you might not know how to do this and have this relationship, but there are people who can help. You know, and that's, I guess, the key, to find the people that can help. Was there... I just... Who...
Who are those people that can help, other than like students like me and yeah?
Well, I'm always... we have on our staff a couple of the best facilitators around in this area, but there's also others across the country. So you can find them. But I guess the question you're asking is more specific than that. Who can it be, right? I know that there's an organization of university students, I can't remember the name of it, but who are connecting with First Nations people across the country and in fact going to their communities. And the whole notion behind it is those young people realize that change is necessary and they want to be a part of it, and that they've got to go and learn on their own. So, you know, we work with that organization and young people to connect them. But I think it comes down to just individual people accepting responsibility and doing something about it. Beyond that, you know, when my son was talking to me, I don't know if all parents do this, but the usual response is, "Oh yeah, well, show me." But what I said to him, I said, "Well, you know, you're absolutely right. That something's got to be done with this. But if you don't take personal action, then it's just words. And like you said, words are cheap, you know. So I encourage people that, you know, you have to take personal action."
We have time for one last question. Thanks.
Good evening. I'm my current paying gig is a federal public servant, and before that I was a service provider in the city of Ottawa. And I guess it's related to your last remarks about action, and people in the room have different roles and responsibilities. Many of us will have had different roles in our lives as service providers or as public servants or as parents. And one of the roles I think about is just our roles as citizens in sort of reframing the discussion about Aboriginal issues and moving forward on things. And I'm sort of reflecting on some of the discussions I've had with people who either weren't willing or weren't able to really sort of roll up their sleeves and think about Aboriginal issues in a productive, constructive way. And I was wondering if you could think about time in your life where you had somebody or a group of people perhaps where perhaps at the beginning of your interactions with them, you probably felt really strong emotions about their reactions because they were just either ignorant or they just didn't care or whatever the problem was. And you were able to sort of reframe the discussion, not as your role as a hereditary chief or a different role you might have had, but so you've got this role as, you know, a person who cares, and you want to reframe the discussion so that you can move forward. And the way you reframed the discussion actually changed somebody's perception of Aboriginal affairs in a productive way. So you had somebody that was really not playing along, and that they were able to actually have a deeper appreciation for Aboriginal affairs. How do you do that in our day-to-day lives?
Well, I can, again, just go to my own experience. Like I mentioned, I live in Smithers. And Smithers is jokingly referred to as the redneck capital of the North, well along with the other communities, so there's a fight amongst them as to who's real. But as I mentioned to you, I went to this meeting where this unfortunate incident took place. And what it caused was a meeting amongst the 4 municipalities that are in our territories. The mayors and the council of those 4 municipalities and our hereditary chiefs and elders. And we came together at the Friendship Center in Smithers to talk about what has happened. You know, because elders from both sides were getting up and saying, our relationship used to be much different. And now we've got this relationship where people are attacking people. And the mayors and the councils all together agreed that we needed to stand together. That they needed to stand with us, we needed to stand with them. And to tell our respective peoples that notwithstanding the differences that we have, we won't stand for this. We will not allow this. And so that started a really, really positive new relationships start to emerge. And it got to the point where, you know, our chiefs, we have an office right in downtown Smithers. And just a couple of years ago, the Smithers Council passed a resolution recognizing the Wet'suwet'en office and saying we have no right to tax them because they're on their own land. And they exempted them from it in recognition of the inherent right. That's by resolution of the council. But that was a matter of about 4 decades of pretty intense relationship. Very, very adversarial to begin with. And now to the point where we're both working together trying to find our way forward. In fact, the town of Smithers and the Wet'suwet'en have a joint tree farm license that we work together. And the town is placed in it as saying in doing this, we will respect Wet'suwet'en values and principles with respect to the land. And for us to be doing it with them is to teach that. And I guess the best thing about that is I was on a ferry recently between Haida and Prince Rupert. And there were a bunch of high school students from Smithers on the bus, from a Christian high school in Smithers. So I'm walking down, I didn't know they were there, and hear this voice say, "Hey, Satsan, we miss you in Smithers," you know. And I thought, why, you know, that's what it's all about, you know, it's getting to that point, you know, just recognize one another. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Satsan. It was an honor to have you here with us today. It was a privilege to hear what you had to say. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your challenge, and thank you for your call to action. So on behalf of Carleton University,
Thank you very much.
small token of appreciation.
Thank you, I appreciate it.